former President Donald Trump is receiving major backlash for a dinner he had with Kanye West and far-right activist and white nationalist Nick Fuentes on Sunday. Trump tried to blame the rapper, who now goes by Ye, saying Ye agreed to have a solo dinner at Mar-A-Lago, but 3 other people unexpectedly showed up, including Fuentes. Trump's team went into full damage control mode, claiming he had no idea who Fuentes was when he arrived and describing the dinner as quick and uneventful.
Despite their best efforts, the dinner received lots of backlash, including from former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who said the dinner was, quote, an awful lack of judgment that makes Donald Trump, quote, an untenable general election candidate for the Republican Party in 2024. The White House also chimed in. Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates released a statement saying, quote, bigotry, hate, and anti-Semitism have absolutely no place in America, including at Mar-A-Lago.
Joining us now to discuss the controversy is former Special Assistant to President Biden and former Press Secretary to First Lady Jill Biden, Michael LaRosa, and Deputy Editor of Off the Press and host of Can't Cancel Rob Smith, Rob Smith. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Rob, let's start with you. First of all, thank you for your service, sir. What were your first thoughts when you heard that Trump had broken bread with Nick Fuentes?
Well, my first thoughts was that it's sort of an outrageous lack of judgment, I would think, on the part of Trump and anybody that's surrounding him. You have to understand, I've been personally targeted by Fuentes myself for being Black and gay and all of these other things that people like him, hate. And, Nick Fuentes is what they pretend Republicans are. He is an anti-Semite. He is a white nationalist. He is a disgusting racist, and he is a homophobic. He is homophobic. He is literally the worst of the worst. Okay, there's no defending that. So the Trump team and Trump himself, he can try to distance himself from it. He can sort of try to pretend as if he didn't know who Nick Fuentes was. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But I would say that anybody that's really on the Trump 2024 team right now, hardcore, would have to think serious about whether or not they want to spend the next 2 years defending these unforced errors and the serious lack of judgment when it comes to having a dinner with Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, what did you make of this, Michael?
It just feels a little like deja vu, like we've seen this movie before. Sadly, I think like the cake is already baked. The people who support Trump, who love Trump, his loyal base, this isn't going to change much for them. I think it's another example, sort of, the associations that he keeps and the things that he does and says and he doesn't take responsibility for. It's going to be up to Republicans to sort of decide whether they want to follow him down another rabbit hole. We've heard criticisms of him before. Again, all of this doesn't feel very new. It's going to be really whether he can win an election. And he's proven that in 2017 statewide elections, 18 he lost the House, in 2020 he lost the White House and the Senate. He lost all the races he supported in Georgia this year, the primary races. And the people who were associated with him lost their races in a very winnable year for Republicans, despite economic pain.
Well, that's not entirely true.
Republicans are just going to have to make that decision whether they want to keep following somebody who's just going to keep losing them elections, because the cake's already baked in terms of who he associates himself with.
Well, I'd like to hop in here and say, it's a very good talking point from Democrats to say that everybody that he was associated with lost. That's not necessarily true. There are a lot of people that had his backing that won their races. Like I'm thinking about, people like Maria Elvira Salazar here in Miami. I'm thinking about Ana Paulina Luna in Florida 13. I'm thinking about people like George Santos in Long Island. So the idea and the narrative that everybody that was backed by Trump lost their races is a false idea.
Sadly, those were just not the races they needed to win.
Excuse me. I think it really does speak to candidate quality, right? And so those are very strong candidates that were not harmed by their association with this. I also have to disagree. What makes this situation different is this, and I'm somebody that was sort of on the coalition in 2020. The log cabin Republicans did what they call a Trump Pride coalition, right? And so I actually stumped for the candidate at the time, his candidate for president. So the difference between now and then is that between 2018 and 2020, there were a lot of things that were sort of like made up and elevated by the left. There were tweets that were sort of misquoted. There were quotes from Trump himself that were misquoted. You had these sort of very fine people on both sides smear, which is one of the biggest smears and biggest lies to ever come from the left. So that stuff, you can sort of explain that away because that stuff was lies. This stuff with Fuentes, this is different because you cannot explain that away. And there's all sorts of stuff online, on the internet, all over the place that is going to show the average viewer who may not know who this person is exactly who this is. So I do believe that this is a major problem for Trump in a way that sort of a lot of the stuff that came up before was not.
So, Rod, let me ask you this, though, because I'm with you. Like, I think that there was a lot of like needless smearing that was not accurate. But what would you say to someone who said, look, we've been telling you that this is he's the guy who's going to have dinner at some point with Nick Fuentes all along. This vindicates, our suspicions all along, even though he denied it and denied it and denied it. What's the correct response to that?
Well, I would say, number one, first of all, I'm not speaking for Trump or anybody on the campaign at this point. But first of all, I would say people that would say I was telling you that he would have dinner with somebody like Nick Fuentes all along did not know who Nick Fuentes was before 5 days ago, first of all. And second of all, like I said before, the argument can be made with all of the onslaught of stuff that was coming before, the very fine people smear, the lie that he said all Mexicans that were coming from the border were rapists and drug addicts and whatever. So these were lies, right? So these things were different. And so if I were to get that argument, I would almost say that this was kind of the boy who cried wolf. You guys have spent the last 7 years at this point lying to the American public, misquoting, misrepresenting all of these different things, so that now when there actually is something that you have to stand on about the type of person that he is breaking bread with, the people that you have lied to for the past 7 years are not listening to you, okay? So this is what I would say to these people.
Well, while President Biden was out in Nantucket on Saturday, he emphasized that no one on his team is having conversations about running again in 2024. Now, while he's hinted at re-election, there's been no formal announcement, while President Trump has already announced his bid for re-election. He could, however, face a primary challenger in Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Elon Musk, Twitter's newest owner, recently endorsed DeSantis, saying he'd vote for him for president in 2024. So, Michael, we've been talking a lot about the Elon Musk Twitter takeover, obviously, for these last few days and weeks. It's kind of endlessly entertaining, but I can sense a real, not just sense, I'm reading this real fear that a lot of Democrats or mainstream media or progressive media people have about Twitter now explicitly in the hands of someone who very much, who endorsed Republicans in the midterms, who has endorsed now a specific Republican, Ron DeSantis. How do you think the media is going to handle that if DeSantis ends up being, as I think he's likely to be, a serious challenger for president? It's that dynamic. And is there going to be a pining for Donald Trump as like a beatable candidate versus a DeSantis who everyone expects to be a more formidable opponent?
No, I think we have to take a step back first. I remember Rick Perry being the next best thing since sliced bread. I remember Scott Walker being the next coming. Hillary Clinton came off a 30-point re-election victory in 2006. That did not make her the nominee. We need to give Governor DeSantis a chance to have the tires kicked a little bit by the media, by Republican voters. He doesn't just have to go through a Republican primary. He has to go through a Republican primary with Donald Trump, where we have to see how he's going to withstand the constant assault on his character, on himself, day in and day out, the way a lot of other Republicans had to deal. And then we need to see what kind of candidate he is coming out of that. But he's not going to run to the center in a primary. He's already very far right. He has a lot of questions to answer for in terms of culture wars that he's tried to start in Florida. He's by no means a moderate Republican that Democrats should be scared of. In fact, I don't really think that he's much of a threat at all when you look at independent voters and what they voted for. Independent voters in Michigan and Pennsylvania, they don't look anything like voters in Florida.
Last
Michael,
word, Rob.
Let me ask you something.
Or
Well, I
go
would
ahead.
say, I mean, oh, sorry. Well, I would, ask him, like, what is the definition of far right? Again, this just seems to be one of these terms and these talking points that come from the left that means absolutely nothing. Right, I've lived in Florida for the past 2.5 years since the pandemic happened. Ron DeSantis, excuse me, is a very moderate to center right Republican, and I speak with independent and Democrat leaning voters in Florida who like what he has done for the state. So define this far right thing. I don't think you can. I think that this is somebody that, should he decide to run, Ron DeSantis will be a very formidable general election opponent. And the reason that he will be is because he actually has a record to stand on. This is not somebody that needlessly engages in culture wars. The Parental Rights and Education Act was something that people were asking for. It's something that most people agree with, even here in Florida, a lot of other places as well. So I don't agree with this characterization of him being far right. To Democrats, anybody with an R by their name that is not Liz Cheney is far right. Okay? So we can kind of kill that talking point right now.
Democrats are very anxious for him to jump in the ring and to have the tires kicked by Donald Trump and the media. We're very excited for it. And we would be embracing running against a record like that in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I would look forward to a Biden-DeSantis race. I think it'll be very interesting.
Michael, let me just ask you, you know the president well, you know his wife. Do you believe him when he says that no one on his team is having conversations about 2024 yet? Should we believe that that's true?
I believe he's running. He's running, and at this point, I wouldn't. The question for me would be, why shouldn't he? He's been one of the most productive, accomplished presidents in modern American history. When you're looking at first terms, he's accomplished enough basically to last him 2 terms. He has every reason to be running, and I expect that he will.
Yeah, I've always said he would run for re-election. That would be totally no one seeks power and then just randomly gives it up. So I would absolutely expect to see that showdown. And then we'll see about DeSantis as a potential general election candidate. At least maybe he has a better choice of dinner guests. He might have that going for him over Trump. Michael, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
More Rising right after this.